Welcome, everyone, to the latest and the final edition of the 2023 season of Hammer Time. I'm joined by the guy that you need to follow if you're following Ponies football, Luke Miller of the Pro Football Newsroom. What's going on, Luke?
Not much, man. Just looking forward to a second USFL championship.
Wow, that's you coming hot right off the gate, man. Like you didn't even we didn't even discuss it. It was just automatic.
I've been waiting for this day since this time last year.
Okay, all right. 7-point spread, is that enough for you guys or no?
Is it 7 now? Last I checked, it was 6.5. But
Okay.
I don't know, man. I stopped paying attention to spreads several weeks ago in this league.
I completely agree. Obviously we'll start with Alex McGough.
Sure.
He's the MVP. No, you're not going to get an argument from me, especially those last couple weeks. He's just kind of taken over the game. What has been his biggest growth throughout the season? Like what has he developed? And I see you rolling your eyes, so there's so much. The guy's been awesome. I'll let you have the floor for. Actually, you're Luke Miller this week.
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. I forgot to update my name. I should have. I put Luke Miller PFN, and then there has that second blank. I wasn't prepared for that, and then I was like, had like a existential crisis of like, what do I type in here? And then I just like defaulted to Shark Dog Mafia. So, but yeah, I forgot to put the Luke Miller. So, man, that's a tough question because, I think as everyone who's followed the league has seen, McGough has just really, it'd be hard for him to have. I don't know how he could have had a better year. I think if I was going to maybe pinpoint one thing, what I would say, as someone who's tried to follow the team closely, is I think there's a lot of things you could say about his play on the field, and that's certainly all true. But I think I would point to some of those things that you don't necessarily see. Like I think him as a leader is sort of light years ahead of maybe where he was a year ago, or even at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, he was the backup going into week one, and it wasn't really his team. I mean, if anything, him and Jamar, I think were always kind of neck and neck, but I mean, Jamar was kind of the guy.
Yep.
And he really, when it was time for him to step in, he took on that mantle and not only delivered in terms of his performance on the field, but very quickly, I think, took on that role of elevating everybody around him and being a guy who, first one in, last one out, studies his butt off during the week to be as prepared as possible. I mean, I think we all see the magic that he's been able to create on the field, but what we don't see is the amount of time and effort and discipline that he puts in to make that possible. And so that's what I think I would point to. Just Coach Holtz has talked about it a lot, but him as a professional, as a leader, as a quarterback, I think he's grown leaps and bounds. And I think that's what's made possible all the other growth that we've been able to enjoy in terms of watching him on the field.
You talk about Holtz, and anytime they go wired up or whatever they call it, it depends what network you're on. The relationship between him and Holtz, like last year, Jamar and Holtz had a serious relationship. Obviously, they college. He recruited him. He was on his mom's couch.
Yeah.
But this relationship seems like it's even further along than what Jamar and Holtz were last year. You credit that directly to the hard work and everything, or is there something else there?
I think you're definitely right. I mean, they've got a special relationship. I wouldn't be surprised if after the season is over, they file paperwork for, Skip to be like his adoptive father or something, because they seem that close. I do think, I think a lot of credit for their relationship. Alex certainly deserves some credit for, I think, listening to Skip, trusting Skip, allowing him to kind of coach and guide him. But I think Skip deserves probably the majority of the credit for the way that he's instilled confidence in Alex and the way that he sort of, I think, has let Alex know from the beginning of this season when he kind of took over, like, you've got what it takes. I trust you. I believe in you. I see the work you put in week by week. And I know that like he said after the game this past week, like Alex is my offensive coordinator. Like I trust what he thinks, what he wants, what he sees. And I think Alex, to have a coach that not only believes in his playmaking ability, but believes in him again, a quarterback, a professional, as again, essentially sort of a sort of second set of eyes, as almost a second sort of offensive coordinator out there when Skip's calling plays. And, a lot of people have talked about how, Skip will only call things if Alex feels good about it, and Alex they'll go back and forth. Like Skip will say, well, maybe we should do this. And Alex will be like, I don't really like that. Let's try this instead. And Skip's like, all right, let's do it. Or there's other times where Skip is like, hey, what do you want to run? And Alex is like, well, I was kind of thinking about this. And Skip's like, well, I was actually thinking about this. And Alex is like, you're right. Like, that's better. Let's do it. So I think just, for whatever reason, whether it's what, things we don't see behind the scenes or things that happen on the field, they've just been able to develop, just kind of a remarkable degree of trust in each other. And that just kind of spills over into everything they do. And they just sort of believe in each other, love each other, trust each other. And it's a really special bond. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about the USFL is you get to kind of see that. I don't know that it's entirely unique. I mean, I don't think it's super common, but I'm sure there's other, NFL, college, other leagues where quarterbacks and head coaches have that kind of relationship, but you don't really get to see it, right? Where in the USFL, you really get to see that kind of bond that they have, and it's a really special thing, I think, for sure.
You talk about relationships. Obviously, Alex has a few favorite targets. Who would you consider the most valuable target for the Stallions?
Man, that's tough to pick one because, like you said, there are multiple. I mean,
Yep.
I think if you had to, if you kind of, gun to my head, forced me to pick one, I'd probably say Jay Sternberger, just because there are several receivers that we have who are very good. And if I was going to pick one receiver, it would probably be Davion Davis. But Sternberger, I think, is Alex's safety blanket.
Yep.
When things break down, when Magoo gets out of the pocket, when he's in a pressure situation where he has to find somebody, like 9 times out of 10, he's looking for Jace. And they were roommates during camp here in Birmingham. They developed, I think, a quick friendship. And obviously, Sternberger is a fantastic football player and tight end. And they just have that kind of rapport where, again, Alex has said it, like he doesn't have to look on the field when a play is called and when a play breaks down to know where Jace is. Like he could kind of, in his words, he could almost kind of just close his eyes and like throw the ball and know that where Jace is going to be. And so they're just kind of in sync like that. And so I think that's probably, if I had to pick one, Alex certainly has had a special connection with, like I said, with Davion Davis, him and Deon Cain. Cain has missed a few games with some injuries and things like that. But, they've certainly, especially in the last few weeks, have I think this past week, Cain had more targets and receptions than anybody. So he's become a top target too, especially, on deep balls. But Sternberger, I think, is kind of, again, when everything else breaks down, like that's his safety blanket. That's the guy he's going to look for.
Another guy that I feel is completely underrated in this league is CJ Maribel. And on USFL Authority, I actually said I'm not going to pick Magoo as the MVP. If I didn't pick Alex Magoo, it was CJ Maribel. All the all-purpose yard, like he's all over the place. He's always picking up like key plays. He might not have a ton of touchdowns like Sternberg, and he might not be that number one target like Davis, but he's so important to this offense.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like you said, super underappreciated. I think a lot of people know and talk about obviously Magoo. A lot of people talk about the receiving weapons he has, but Maribel doesn't really get enough credit for what he adds to the offense and really to the whole team, as you said. I mean, whether it's rushing, receiving, or returning, he really has kind of done it all for the Stallions this year. And he I think a lot of people when we signed Scarborough last year were obviously very excited about that because of the Alabama connection. But Maribel was still kind of always the guy, the starting guy, and Scarborough really kind of he had some great plays last year and was a huge addition for the team. But it's clear that Skip really loves Maribel, really trusts Maribel, and Maribel, as long as he's with the Stallions, is going to be, I think, the main running back, and anybody else is going to be kind of, in a sense, sort of second fiddle to him because he's very reliable. He knows the offense, and he runs hard. He catches the ball well. He just kind of is sort of the glue, I think, that kind of helps bring everything else together. And And he does all that without really an ounce of recognition or praise. I mean, he's really both seasons, last year and this year. I mean, he's the Stallions leading rusher last year, leading rusher this year, and both seasons he doesn't get talked about much, but he's been huge for the team.
Well, considering you guys are third in the league in rushing yards, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which is absolutely. I know Magoo's got a ton, but
Yeah.
CJ Maribel gets slept on for all USFL or even second team. He's always put in the middle of the pack or the lower the end of the pack. But I think CJ Maribel is the most important player on your offense outside of Alex Magoo, personally.
Yeah, he makes things happen for sure for us.
Davion Davis. Now, as a Maulers guy, we saw him. He had a pretty decent day against the Maulers, probably the best receiving day against the Maulers this whole season in the entire league. He had 8 catches, 71 yards on 10 targets with a touchdown. Has he been putting those up all year? If we're not watching the Stallions, or is it kind of like hit or miss?
No, it's pretty much been like that all year. I mean, he had a couple games where he maybe only had 1 or 2 catches, but that's certainly a rarity. He finished the season with 575 yards, which I think, if I remember correctly, was the second most in the league.
Yep.
4 touchdowns. He had, as far as receivers who had, I think, at least like 10 or 15 catches, he had the highest average yards per catch. It was over 15. And so, uh, and a lot of that was yards after catch.
Yep.
I know Justin Hall also had a lot of yards after catch. So I think maybe Davis, I want to say, was either maybe like tied with Hall or Henney. I think all 3 of them
Yep.
kind of, had a ton of yards after catch. But as far as the regular season goes, I think Davis had like 309, which, that's the majority of his yards.
Yeah.
So he hasn't necessarily been a deep threat. It's not like, that's been more Dion Kane for the Stallions. But what he'll do is he runs these, 15-yard, kind of either digs across the middle, or a slant route, or a drag or something like that. And again, him and Magoo have had a really good rapport from day one, because Magoo pointed this out in an interview once after a game. But when the season started, they were both second string. So the starting quarterback obviously was Jamar. The starting slot receiver was Marlon Williams. And Davis was kind of, I don't know how much he would have. He definitely would have played, but like in the first game, Marlon Williams was the only offensive player other than Jamar to not come off the field, like, ever. Like, all the other receivers were rotating, running backs were rotating, they were moving guys in and out, but like Marlon Williams never came off the field. And Skip said, like, after the game, like, our plan was like Marlon was going to be like our guy this year. And when he went down, that opened up the opportunity for Davis to step in as a starter. But when him and Magoo both stepped in, they had all these reps together leading up to the season, because they were back sort of second string, quote unquote, together. And so they kind of immediately had that connection and that rapport. And so a lot of times Magoo looks for him, finds him, and then he's just very good with the ball in his hands. Again, like Isaiah Henney or Justin Hall. I mean, there's several receivers like this in the league, kind of those slot guys that they can take a 5 or 10 yard pass and turn it into a 25 or 30-yard gain. And, we saw, I mean, if you watch the South Division Championship, Davis did that. His first touchdown, he caught a slant 7 yards across the middle and broke 4 tackles on his way to the end zone in a 36-yard touchdown. So he's been kind of doing that all year for sure. And, Sternberger's gotten a lot of hype because he has so many touchdowns, but, and rightfully so. But Davis has also been, I mean, they together, they accounted for, I think, in the regular season, the 2 of them accounted for like 10 touchdowns. I think, between 900 to 1,000, somewhere in their yards. They averaged between the 2 of them over 15 yards per catch. So he's been a huge addition for the Stallions, as a guy that came in this offseason.
I think one of the most underrated parts of your offense is definitely the offensive line. I think the offensive line, I can't believe they had what? 2? No, they didn't have any all USFL, did they?
None.
Which is insane, because the network, we put Cole Cabral on there as center because he's been phenomenal. Talking to Boogie and Olive, they said that was the toughest offensive line as a unit. Is this Stallions team. Talk a little bit about how this offensive line has developed, because it's tough in the spring leagues to get these offensive lines to gel quickly. And you've had some turnover from last year. It's not like you have the same 5 guys back. Just talk about how this line has gotten better and better. And it also obviously helps that you got a guy like Magoo behind there.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like Magoo is getting destroyed like he was at the beginning of the season.
No, yeah. I mean, I think the Stallions' offensive line has not got. I think there's two reasons they haven't gotten maybe some of the recognition that they deserved. I mean, obviously, you all, gave them a lot of props, but as far as outside of that, they haven't gotten a ton of recognition. I think one reason for that is they didn't get off to the best start,
Yep.
and I think part of that is like what you described. I think it took them some time to gel because we really only brought back kind of two main offensive linemen, O'Shea Dugas, who's plays guard for us, and Darius Harper, who plays tackle. But pretty much everybody else who either starts or rotates in is an off-season addition. And so I think it took them a few weeks to really kind of find their rhythm. And secondly, I think kind of like you hinted at in terms of like, Boogie talked about, um, I think they've been very good as a unit.
Yep.
And it's not they don't really have one guy who's I think drastically better than the others, but they also don't have one guy who's a huge liability or weakness. Like as a unit, they're very good, and especially the way they've gelled and grown throughout the season. And so it's hard to pick out I did an all USFL team for the newsroom website, and I didn't put any Stallion starting linemen on there. And it wasn't because they weren't on my radar. I didn't necessarily think they deserved it, but it was just like it was really hard to pick out one of them to the exclusion of the others. And so I think to their credit, they've really grown a ton over the season. At the beginning of the year, Magoo was getting sacked a lot more. Like I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain this past weekend against the Breakers, he didn't get sacked once. And again, some of that is his ability to, escape. But and that's been the last couple games. Like he's gotten sacked maybe like once the last couple games, like per game. Whereas at the beginning of the year, it was like 3 or 4 times a game. And at the beginning of the year, we couldn't run the ball at all. Like the first 3 games, I mean, it was terrible. Like we were averaging like 45 yards rushing per game or something. And that was mostly Magoo, just, when things broke down. But when they kind of finally gelled as a unit, maybe halfway through the season or so, they've really, I think, developed into, quietly kind of one of the best offensive lines in the league. And it's been, I think, a huge piece to why the Stallions offense has obviously been able to be so successful. They certainly don't get enough praise or recognition. No offensive line ever does, but they've really come a long way from the beginning of the year, and that's played a large part, I think, in the Stallions offense being able to have the success that it's had, especially down sort of in the home stretch of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Your offensive line, it seemed to come together around the same time you guys have taken off.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the season, you're kind of in the middle of the pack, and then you guys just broke away. And I think the offensive line was a big reason for that. Obviously, Magoo is awesome, but that offensive line settled the offense just a little bit. Let's switch sides. Defense, your cornerbacks. For those that don't follow Stallions, give me a grade for them.
As far as the season?
As far as the season, and then we'll do a first semester, second semester.
Sure.
So most of the season, 7 games, let's say, and then the last few.
Yeah. So I would say most of the season, I would probably give them a B minus. I don't think they certainly were not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think that's been the Stallions' strength. On the whole, they've kind of struggled at times to kind of create turnovers. They've probably given receivers a little bit too much cushion, especially good receivers. I mean, Corey Coleman, he's amazing, and we made him look amazing when he played us. That's one example. The Stallions defense all year as a whole unit has kind of been sort of bend don't break. If you look at yards, I think they've given up if you look at yards per game, I think they're like 7th or 8th in the league. Like they've given up a lot of yards.
Yep.
If you look at points, they're like 3rd or 4th, right?
They're 3rd, yeah.
Yeah. So like they kind of have this bend don't break sort of thing, but a lot of that bending is in the secondary. West Hills ran all over us in week 3, but really other than that week, I mean, Troy Williams kind of ran all over us too when we played you all, but I would say overall for the most part, like we played Mark Houston a couple weeks ago, at the end of the season there, and he had I don't know, 60, 70 yards that game or something like that, and, on a decent number of carries. So I think the run game once they kind of got past some of the injuries and stuff, and kind of Quentin Poling stepped in, and they sort of figured out the linebacking core. The run defense, I think, has done pretty well, but the secondary has been pretty loose at times. Now, that being said, like, again, I wouldn't say they've been terrible or anything like that. I just don't know that I would say that's been our strength. I think last year's secondary was a lot better, or at least played a lot better on the whole than this year's has. I do think they've been playing better the last few weeks. Like, especially in the South Division Championship, Brian Allen, who was kind of, returning corner, leader on the defense, a guy that was expected to have a really good year. And not that he's not, but certainly didn't make the kind of noise that maybe he hoped or we hoped he would. But then in the South Division Championship, he steps in and has 2 interceptions and 3 pass breakups. And that's kind of what I think we're looking for all year. It just, it kind of took towards to the end of the year for it to really, for whatever reason, to click. So Nate Brooks was a great offseason addition for us. He's the other starting corner, and he's had a really solid year. I think he's one of the team leader in tackles, and most of those have been solo tackles. So that's been, I think, a really helpful thing for us, his ability to bring guys down in space. And he was, I believe, I want to say, leading the team in interceptions as far as the regular season. So he was a great offseason addition. So again, like I said, B minus. I mean, I think they've been solid, not our strength, but not shabby. It's not like they've just been getting torched left and right. It's just there's certainly been some room for improvement.
Defensive line has to be a strength, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Even though they're 7th in the league in sacks.
Yeah, I really wish the league tracked pressures.
Yeah,
because I think
I agree.
I think if they did, I think the Stallions would be one of the top teams. Now that's speculation. I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't watched every game of every team, but like a great example of that is Dondre Tillman. If you look at sacks alone, he doesn't really you wouldn't think he's necessarily nearly as productive as some other guys in the league. I mean, I think he had 4 sacks in the regular season, which is not nothing. But, there's other guys, obviously Speaks and some of these other guys with, 9, 7, 6 sacks. But if you look at pressures, at least as of week 8, week 9, I know Tillman, I think, was top 3 in the league in pressures. I think he was at 33 at that point. So he was averaging almost 4 pressures a game. Yeah. And a lot of that was in the latter half of the season. I think it was week 6, 7, and 8, I want to say. He had 7 pressures, 8 pressures, and 7 pressures. And so that was a 3-game stretch where the dude had 22 pressures, which is crazy. And so I think the defensive line as a unit, again, it's kind of similar to the offensive line. They didn't get a lot of recognition this year, a lot of praise. We didn't have any defensive linemen on the all USFL team. But I think part of that is because it's not like the Panthers where it's everybody knows Breland Speaks, but your average fan probably couldn't tell you another Panthers defensive lineman, right? There's kind of that one guy who really, not that they didn't have other good players, but he was really the one that was really kind of creating all the chaos. For us, it just hasn't been that way. It's just been kind of the whole unit has been, nobody's really been a weakness and nobody's been drastically better than everybody else. They've just kind of all contributed as far as the run game, as far as getting pressure on the quarterback and occasionally, getting a sack when they need it. And so they've played. I knew they would be a strong suit for us coming into the year because we had a great defensive line last year and they returned all 4 starters. And then they added some guys in the offseason. So I knew it would be a strength, and it certainly has been. And again, especially in the last few weeks, the first time we played the Breakers, we got 0 pressure on McLeod. Yeah. And then the next time we played him, we got a lot more pressure on him and made his life pretty miserable. And that was, I think, one of, if not the difference in the game. Yep. And then, this past weekend, that trend sort of continued. They continued to kind of be able to get back there. So definitely, I think the strongest point of our defense.
Definitely. Linebackers, Poling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, linebacker has been an interesting spot for us this year. We started the year with Scooby, Nate Holley, and Quentin Poling as kind of our 3 linebackers, with Poling kind of coming in and out depending on the personnel situation. Obviously, Scooby has essentially missed almost the entire season. Holley's been consistent for us, but I would say he's been solid. He hasn't been dominant. He certainly hasn't been a liability, but he's kind of just been a solid guy. Poling kind of emerged as that guy for us on defense and was a stud. Unfortunately, we've missed him for the last 2 weeks, and As far as I know, he will not be playing in the championship. And so I think that certainly was a big loss, but it was kind of, offset by the fact that about the same time he left, Scooby was able to come back. And so that was obviously huge for us. Now, Scooby was kind of in and out this past weekend. He didn't really need to play the whole game because of how it went, but he was throwing up on the sideline. And, I don't know if that was just jitters or if that was lack of conditioning because he's been out for so many weeks, or if he got hit in the gut, or, I haven't been able to get kind of the story behind how he was feeling. But at least having him back, it's kind of like Alex Magoo on the offensive side of the ball. Like, he just makes everyone better on the defensive side. Everybody sort of elevates with him out there, kind of coaching them up and encouraging them. And so I wouldn't say our linebacking core has been, amazing as far as their play this year. Again, probably similar to our secondary. I'd give them, B minus. Like, they've been solid. But I think, they've been able to find ways to kind of get the job done, generally speaking, like 9 times out of 10 when they've needed to. And having Scooby back is, definitely the biggest boost for that linebacker core. So hopefully he'll be, healthy and able to kind of play most or all of the game this weekend.
Defensive player of the year for your defense. Last year is Gates. In my opinion, it was Gates. You guys are definitely
DeMarcus Gates was our best player last year by far. Either side of the ball, in my opinion. No disrespect to Victor Bolden or some of what the other guys, but Gates was
awesome. And which is awesome.
Well, he was insane what he did. I mean, sacks, stopping the run, coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, dude's amazing. And he was at the playoff game, which was really cool to see him come back and support the team, and just, I think, a great thing for the league. Like, I hope that continues to happen for all these teams when guys go on and succeed and kind of make it to that next level. So, yes, he was definitely the defensive player of the year last year. If I had to give it to somebody, I would say Quentin Poling. Unfortunately, he's had to miss the last couple of weeks, and like I said, I don't think he'll be in the championship, which is a huge loss for us. But I think he really came in and stabilized the defense when Scooby went out, and he was our only defensive player of the week winner. Won it twice. Was a co-winner a couple times, but won twice, and was just. He kind of sort of. He has the exact opposite personality of Scooby Wright, but a very similar style of play. Like, all over the field, hard hitter, can cover when he needs to, can really get pressure on the quarterback when, Chavis styles up sort of blitz packages. And I think when our defense lost their kind of emotional leader, Poling kind of emerged as sort of a leader by action, not necessarily maybe by words, but by action. And I think really helped stabilize our defense. And I don't know if they would have, had as good of a stretch kind of in that mid to the end part of the season without what he was able to do until he had to step away and Scooby came back. So he'd be the defensive player of the year for me. And there's certainly other guys that come to mind, but he's the guy that I think this defense wouldn't be the same this year if they hadn't had him.
Awesome. Special teams. You guys have been pretty solid there all year long. All USFL, Corey Wadman, right?
Yep. Colby Wadman, yep.
And Aubrey had a solid season. I know he wasn't all USFL.
Mm-hmm.
Deion Kane obviously had big moments in the return game. Give me a quick synopsis. I think I summed it up kind of. But
you did great. Aubrey's been fairly automatic. He was 35 of 35 on extra points during the regular season, missed his first extra point in the playoff game. But then he hit 5 in a row after that. So, 5 of 6, not too shabby. Yeah. So he's sitting at 40 of 41 on the season, which is pretty good. Field goals, if you include the playoff game, I think now he's 16 of 17 on the year. So he missed one it was a 51 yarder or 52 yarder. It was, the only miss he had was from plus 50. So he's been awesome for the Stallions for 2 years. As you said, Wadman, all USFL punter. He was good for us last year. He was with us last year, but I don't know what he did in the offseason. Like, his leg has got. I mean, he must have had some serious leg workout routine in offseason because the dude has just been bombing them this year. Like he was having 65-yard punts left and right. So that's been obviously always helps to be able to have that to kind of flip the field. And then yeah, I mean Deion Kane, he hasn't had the greatest average as far as returns like Derek Dillon, Josh Simmons, Terry Wright. There's been several returners that I think have kind of, as far as like their consistency,
Yep.
have been better than Kane. But Kane's been as good as anyone else as far as kind of busting it open and getting that big play. 2 return touchdowns, one obviously against you all in the first go around between these two. And so, that's been a super clutch for the team at times. And when he's been hurt and stuff like that, and they've had to have Marable back there, he's done a great job returning too. And they've got Davion Davis returning punts. He hasn't, nowhere near the season returning punts that Isaiah Henney had, but probably either him or Justin Hall would probably be the next best punt returner, I would say, in the league this year. So yeah, the Stallions, I think, special teams unit, similar to the Maulers, both of these teams, I think, have had extremely solid special teams, performances. There really hasn't been any sort of weakness in any part of the special teams game for either of these teams, in my opinion.
Yeah. Outside of the first 2 weeks for the kicking game for the Maulers.
Sure. Yeah.
And then week 3 when Blewett came in, and then we're good to go.
Yeah, he righted the ship for sure.
All right, so we're headed towards the championship, obviously. I'm going to ask you kind of who has the advantage? Do you know enough about the Maulers to feel confident to go who has the advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to be as objective as I can, I do think the Stallions have the advantage. I think obviously the Maulers defense is their strength and has had a better year than the Stallions defense. I do think, it's a tough call because I think these teams are offsetting in ways, right? Like I just said, I think they're pretty even as far as special teams.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd give the Maulers a slight advantage just because of what they can kind of consistently do in the return game, and the Stallions haven't been as consistent. But I think obviously the Maulers I'd give the advantage defensively, and the Stallions I'd give the advantage offensively. I think just based on the regular season records, based on the fact that the Stallions have kind of been to the championship before, returned several starters from that team, and obviously have Holtz, who's led them to the championship and led them back. That's nothing to take away from the Maulers and what they've accomplished and what the job Ray Horton has done. But I think given all of those factors, it's kind of like, you're innocent until proven guilty. With the Stallions, it's kind of like, well, they're kind of the ones on the throne until somebody dethrones them. And maybe this weekend that will happen. The Maulers will sort of take the crown. But as of right now, I think, I'd have to give the slight edge to the Stallions for some of those reasons. But as we've seen in this league, any of these teams can beat any of these other teams any weekend. So the Stallions certainly aren't light years ahead of other teams in the league, and I think the gap has really closed this year from last year. Not that it was huge last year, but I think it's certainly closed from what it was. But I think the Stallions still are, the sort of the reigning champs and the best team in the league. And so I think with what they've been able to do offensively this year, and with the way their defense has been able to play specifically in the red zone, I think they strike me as a little bit more complete of a team than the Maulers. But the Maulers offense has been getting better by week, and they certainly are, I know, going to be ready to play. So,
well, it's kind of like what we talked about with your offensive line, and about week 5, you started to gel. The offensive line for the Maulers the last couple of weeks has gotten better. It's still not top in the league, but it has gotten better. And Troy's had a little bit of time, and he takes care of the ball. Like they have the least amount of turnovers in the entire league, which is crazy to think because everyone thinks the offense is absolutely garbage or the worst in the league. Like everyone thinks that, but their job is to possess the ball and get points. They have gotten better in the red zone. Obviously, the first time these two teams matched up, the Maulers were 0 for 3 in the red zone for touchdowns. If they get one in that game, they beat the Stallions. So
yep.
It's really a close game. I feel like the spread is kind of like you said, they're on the throne. and they've been rolling. They just destroyed their biggest rival, so they definitely have the momentum. I look forward to this game, man. I look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. You said you'll be up there earlier in the week, so
Yep.
I will see you up there at spring stock or summer stock. I'm sorry.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's going to be great. It'll be great to get to see everybody in person, and I'm sure whatever the outcome is, I'm sure it's going to be an amazing night, an awesome game. On both of these teams, you've got some truly elite football players, and so if you're a football fan with a pulse, you need to be tuning in Saturday night, because it's going to be an epic game. I mean, this was the game I wanted personally. I think especially going into the latter half of the season, the Maulers have kind of solidified their place as the best team in the North, and the Stallions have been the best team in the South. And I think it's a compelling matchup, because you've got two very different teams, but two very strong teams, and I think it makes for an exciting game for sure.
Definitely. Are you willing to go on record with a score prediction, or are you going to save that for another time?
I'll give one if you give one.
All right, I'll go first. I'll make it easy. Pittsburgh 26-20.
Okay. I'm going to say I think there's a little more scoring on both sides. I think I'm going to say Stallions win 34-23.
34 would be.
I guess 23 is what you said. So I guess I'll say 34-24 there. So
34 would actually be a season high for points, I believe, for that the Maulers are giving up. No, they gave out 37
to the Stars, right? Yeah.
So second highest.
Second highest, yeah.
So you're guaranteeing offensive success.
Well, I think it depends on. So I would say that I think the Stallions, they're going to get some points, right? Yep. It's just a matter of how many. I think a lot of it's going to come down to can on the Stallion side of it, can they protect the ball? On the Mauler side of it, can they force turnovers and mistakes? If the Stallions play like they did this past weekend or close to it, I think they're able to put up upwards of 30 points. Now, they turn the ball over a few times, make some bad mistakes. Then, like the first time these two teams played, they might be having to sort of claw and scrape their way to get into the 20s. But if they play like they can, I think they're certainly capable of putting up into the 30s. But it just depends on who makes plays. Whether Davion Davis catches the ball and breaks a few tackles and turns a 10-yard gain into a 50-yard touchdown, or Magoo throws it a little high and it tips off Davion Davis's fingers and into Mark Gilbert's hands, and he returns it for a pick six. So it's going to come down to who makes the plays on Saturday night.
Fair enough. I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I look forward to meeting you up there in Canton. And go Maulers, right?
Giddy up. That's right.
All right. Thanks, man.
Absolutely.